All right. Hello. Um, I'm going to talk with you about hybrid development with QtWebKit. I'm going to explain a little bit about what that actually is, what we're going to use it for, and do some live coding unless I forget how to code between now and the time I need to do that, which happens often. I'm sure I've been abducted by aliens. My name is Noam. I'm a software architect at the CTO organization. I work in part on stuff I can't talk about yet, but in part I work on WebKit. I'm a WebKit reviewer, and I work mainly on all things hybrid and on everything that has to do with hardware acceleration in WebKit. So all the animations and 3D transforms, making them hardware accelerated, and just in general making rendering on GPUs faster. I actually did not write the WebKit bridge, but I did write the documentation for it. So this is about me. Now, how I got to doing this is that I was working before joining the CTO organization. I was working as part of the Qt organization with what we call key accounts, the big companies that use Qt. And I was in charge of helping the ones that were using WebKit, in particular Netflix in the US and others in the TV industry, trying to help them get the most out of the platform. And in the course of doing that, I found hybrid development to be something that has a very nice trade-off between several features that really solve several use cases. That's how I got into this. Okay, this is a famous quote. 2012 is going to be the year HTML5 takes over. It was said by Nostradamus in 1552, so it must be true. Now, this is, of course, a lot of hype and a lot of people making up stuff and trying to figure out solutions for everything and silver bullet. I prefer this quote by myself, so I didn't put my name. So I like to look at it like this. HTML5 is a practical solution to some problems. It's probably not to others. Probably to some things it's very good for, something it's not. Specifically, the things we were using it for is what was referred as a server-driven UI. So we have a part of our application that is very static or deployed once to the client in some installer or package manager or an app store. But they have a part in the UI that is server-driven. They do not want to deploy it. They do not want the deployment step. Some people call that zero deployment as well. So HTML5 provides a very out-of-the-box way of doing that. You know that if you put something on a server that's supported in HTML today, it's going to be supported in the future. So if people have this version of the runtime or a future version of a runtime, it will be able to support that in the future. One of the reasons why HTML5 is good for that, particularly, apart from the security features in it that allows you to safely serve stuff from untrusted servers on the network, is the fact that WebKit comes with tens of thousands, I think, or maybe just thousands, of layout tests, which are there to ensure that old content stays valid. So we have layout tests to make sure that websites from 10 years ago don't get broken by new features that we introduce today. So that's an important thing for server-driven UI, apart from the declarative and scripting nature of HTML and security features. Now, what is hybrid? So this is my definition of hybrid in this context. Hybrid means a little too many things. Can imagine we worked with the automotive industry as well. Get to a meeting, talk about hybrid, and they thought we were talking about hybrid cars. No, actually, that didn't happen. But hybrid in this context means a native application that incorporates HTML content in some form or another. So it's still a native application. We're not talking about a browser that just serves regular content. So we're talking about how do you incorporate that into a native environment. So why go hybrid? So we saw before that I was talking about HTML5 providing a really good set of use cases for server-driven UI, also for multiple platforms. So it happens to be that whether HTML5 is good or bad, it happens to be that it's there on many, many platforms, supported natively by the platform on all the devices like iOS, Android, on our devices, on desktop, all the desktop browser, and Windows Phone as well, and the other types of devices that you sometimes can't develop natively in the same tool for. The problem with HTML5 is that because it goes so broad, it's also very limited, or not very, but just limited. The local storage functionality and the database functionality, given an example, are very very limited in scope. They do a very narrow scope of things. You can do a little key value pairs. You can do maybe SQL or a key value tree. But if you look at the kind of stuff we can do with C++ with industrial grade data models that can very efficiently work with thousands of items or more, we don't have APIs for that in HTML5. Also, if you look at all the stuff that usually you don't want browsers to access. For example, you don't want browser to access your local file system. And there are a lot of security issues of things you don't want to allow browsers to access. There are also things that are very platform specific that the browser just doesn't abstract away. Also, if we talk about features, everything doesn't have all the industrial grade stuff you need. If we talk about Canvas, for example, Canvas has an API like QPainter. Canvas can draw a lot of nice things, a lot of effects, etc. But a lot of the things that really make a good toolkit, like Qt or others, take for example fill rules when you try to paint. There are fill rules that help you paint when you do how do you call it? The bucket fill. It's the wrong name for that. Yeah. So so Canvas is limited in that way. It doesn't allow you to do all those things. So sometimes you do need native to go down that route. So hybrid gives us a good trade-off between being able to do a server-driven UI easily and securely, and with future backing, future backwards compatibility, while we can use the native aspects of this hybrid to extend it to the stuff that HTML5 and normal browsers don't support out of the box. Sometimes it's even a matter of going a little bit before HTML5 is ready, or before the engines implemented something. If you're familiar with PhoneGap, so that's a library that bridges the gaps that the web engines don't do. So if you want access to your contacts, PhoneGap uses the hybrid techniques to access contacts on all the different platforms and provides um, the different enablers to do it with a single API. So a hybrid is a base technology or a base set of technologies that enable all this stuff. So we talk about, I started touching on iOS and Android. Although every mobile platform today has some solution to some solution for hybrid, whether it's more extended or less. In iOS, you can have a web view and extend it. In Android, on the Windows Phone, they all have the concept of a web view. Even in regular Windows development today, you can put an IE view somewhere with regular.NET. So it's actually a very popular approach. Even if you look at the people like saying how there's a lot of native apps on the different app stores. Well, the truth is that a lot of them are actually hybrid. But because they're deployed as native apps, we don't really know what they're written in. But a lot of them are actually a web view that serves some content or just has HTML for the UI. So if I go back to the presentation from CNN, there is a distinction between web on a browser and web technologies used in a native app. So for mobile web, yes, you want some sort of common denominator. But with web content in a native app, you can do a lot more and get to a much better user experience and functionality than you can do with a regular mobile web. So when I talk about hybrid, I talk about a set of technologies. I'm going to demonstrate. I don't have much talking point. It's more going to be a bit more coding than talking. But there are a few flavors of hybrid. So one is mixed UI, meaning putting some UI in QML or widgets or anything else, and some UI in web. If you look at the music stores, for example, they have usually some sort of tree for all the music somewhere on the side, and they have the storefront in HTML. So the storefront is usually a server-driven UI style thing. So that's a classic mixed UI. So native enablers, I'm going to demo this. So what I was talking about with getting a contact list or getting access to the camera, either on desktop or on mobile. So being able to bridge native enablers and native functionality into a web UI is something that hybrid allows you to do. Web scraping is something that's really popular with Qt. Any of you heard of the tool called Phantom.js? A little bit. I'll show a little bit later because it uses QtWebKit. It's a cool tool by a friend. So web scraping is basically a headless browser. So you can have a program that goes to websites, get content, can render content, act on them without actually showing anything to the user. A lot of libraries use that for things like OAuth, for example, because OAuth requires a regular browser UI to access that to access the application. So that's one use of it. Web scraping. Another use is to do static analysis on web pages. If you think the crawlers or spiders or whatever creepy animal Google has to get all the search results. So that is some form of web scraping, so to get statistics and things from the web page without actually showing it to any user. Implementation of hybrid. So which techniques or technologies are actually there that constitute of what we call hybrid? So one is language bindings, and that's the main thing I'm going to show. So basically, WebKit allows us to add a concept of language bindings to the platform. In the case of Qt, we can bind a JavaScript object to a Qt object. This is similar to the Python binding or the Qt script bindings to objects, if you guys are familiar with that, or the Jambi project we had before. The language bindings are a very common design pattern in the world. So this is one way to achieve hybrid development. Another one is plugins. Plugins are actually a form of hybrid development. So if you think about all the extension you can get for Firefox, or even the Flash plugin that you get for Firefox or Chrome, etc., or a PDF reader. So those are all natively written and are incorporated into the web environment. An issue we see with plugins is that on the new mobile browsers, they're not supported. It's a kind of a thing of desktop. It's still important for some things in desktop, like Flash and like PDF, but we see it less and less as something that stays popular as a way to deliver content. First of all, HTML5 is supporting new use cases, and people are reluctant to install plugins on their machines for coming from arbitrary web pages. Interesting projects around plugin today is the native client from Google. I think they call it Pepper now. So where you can safely run native code that can't access anything in your system. So actually, we have Qt running on that, or had that a while back. That's actually a new kind of different approach to plugin. So a third option for hybrid is actually the oldest one, which is to create local HTTP server or local WebSocket server on your machine and access it as if it was a regular web page. So that is actually a form of hybrid, though not particular to QtWebKit. I believe this is actually a very good solution for many of the things people try to do, mainly if the web content is trusted, and if the interaction with the content that is in the local server does not have to happen in real time, because there is some overhead to having a local HTTP run all the time and pass all the data. So this is not very good for highly interactive stuff. Now, feature support. WebKit is moving forward to the multiple process model, where the rendering of the web page is done in a different process than the UI. So if you want to do hybrid development with the UI and the backbone process together, you have to think in terms of inter-process communication. You have to think asynchronous. So some of those things we have today, we would have to revisit and think how would they work with that model. Until then, a lot of the stuff we're showing today works with the old model, and the old model is still supported. So let's see if I can make this big enough. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to show is how you use language bindings to Qt from JavaScript. And I'm going to show how easy it is and how powerful it can potentially be. So to get started, I'm going to use the mobile HTML5 template that comes with newer versions of Qt Creator. We'll tweak it a bit to make it a little more desktop-y because we're running this on desktop. And then I'll show how to extend it. So, other project, HTML5 application. Call it DevDays 11 Munich. I'm going to have to do it twice. So I'm just going to generate the standard HTML file and play with that. This is a mobile template, so it doesn't default to desktop, but we'll make it work anyway. And we have a template ready. One thing I'm going to do with it, first of all, just make it bigger so we can see it on the screen. So I got started with a few clicks of a button on a project wizard. So I have the basic of everything I need for an HTML5 view. This already uses graphics view, so I can use all the hardware acceleration features, etc. Now, imagine that you want to expose to this application something that's on a device or on your desktop that's not normally there. So I create an object for it. We will call it my object. The important part in the Qt language bindings is to use QObjects. Because Qt comes with built-in runtime information, introspection about QObjects, that's what we use for our language bindings, and we don't need to generate more bindings on top of what's already there in the meta object compiler. So the trick to handling QObject from the web view is to use signal slots and properties. So just to test that it works, I will create a property. I will call it text. Okay, can everybody see it right? And we will give it a function. Okay, so now we have a object that doesn't do anything useful, but we can test that the whole cycle works okay. So first of all, we have to include my object, and we want to include few things from QtWebKit, so we might as well just do this. Where's my cursor? Oh, there you are. So now I instantiate my object. And I add it to the viewer. Now, an object when added to JavaScript is a property of the frame. That's because each frame in HTML has its own JavaScript execution context. So if you have several frames in the page, you have to do this for each and every one of them. In this case, we have only one frame. And we have this function, add to JavaScript window object. Let's do magic.cpp kind of thing. I'm going to have to do this. So we just call it my object and a pointer to the object. Now, to make sure it works, what I'm going to do is when I load the page, so this is the HTML5 that comes with the default template. You saw it say hello HTML5 world. I'm just going to make it say hello Qt world instead, but the word Qt is going to come from C++. So I'm going to put that in a variable. We call it my object text. See that the word text in here is the same property name that we chose here. That's very important for the introspection process. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get the second H1 element in the page. And put the text into HTML. And now we hope that it actually works. Yes. Okay, so this is the very, very basic enabler for hybrid. On top of that, we can build cool stuff. So I showed how you use properties. The same way I can read a property, I can also write it. Let's just call it excuse me for putting everything in the H file. I know it's bad, but it would work for now. So this is very good. Imagine if you have a native enabler, but you want to do some setup for it. So properties are a very agile way to do that. So I'm just going to put the word HTML5 into the text. Now, to prove that it works, when I set it, I'm going to put it into the variable with a different, with some addition. So this allows me to do both reading and writing. And you can do a lot with this already, since it gives you input and output. Though it is pretty limited. You probably just want it for data style things and not so much for actions. For that, we have in Qt signals and slot. How many of you have used signals and slots before? OK. Just making sure you're awake. All right. So in this case, I will do a very simple signal and slot. I will just create a slot that calls another signal. Whoever wrote Qt spaghetti code like me has a lot of slots that call other signals, and that's the only thing they do. So in this case, if you're like me, you'd find this familiar. How about we call it do something with number? And we'll pass in a number. And here we will emit something was done with number. And that will also get a number. In this case, we will emit the number times 10. Just to show the whole thing working. So the idea is that we can call things in the native environment from the web. We can do that. We can listen to signals that come from the Qt environment in the web environment. So let's just add another div here. We call it number. And this is where we're going to put whatever it is we create. So first of all, we'll connect the signal. When I do this, I like copy-pasting from the actual name. Because this is a combination of a compiled and a non-compiled environment, you don't want name errors that are hard to trace. Though you can probably trace them with a web inspector that Pierre showed in the previous presentation. So the object that I have in HTML now would have something was done in number member. And that has the magic word connect, which is similar to the magic word connect in Qt. Now, another thing about JavaScript is that JavaScript supports anonymous functions. So I can just create an anonymous function right here and connect my signal to it. Now, since this signal emits a number as a payload, I can pass it to my function. So in this case, I select the number div. OK. Now, in order for this to work, I need to actually call that slot. So I call my object something with number, and I pass it the number 10. If this is all good, it should show the number 100. So you see a round trip between signal, slots, properties, and a web view. And since I have 15 minutes left, I have more stuff, but you see how quick it is to get this done. And to get hybrid applications up and running. Excuse me? Yes. So there is actually, the question was, can we exchange things that are a little more complicated than a number? So I will show two examples of that. So one thing you can't do with HTML is pass kind of arbitrary structures. Like if you think of a QRect, you can pass it to the web environment and then pass it back to native, but the web environment will not be able to do anything with it. Because we don't have introspection for those kind of things. We don't have introspections for a QRect. Doing that for all our classes will result in very high footprint for Qt. So we try to keep it just for Q objects. What we can do, however, is use the variant system. So the code in WebKit that converts JavaScript objects to C++ and back is all based on the variant system. So let's use a Q property because it's easiest. We should include Q variant. Your good friend here is QVariant map. So QVariant map is a map of strings to something, or a map of string to variant, while that something can again be a QVariant map. So QVariant map can actually be a whole tree of objects, kind of like JSON. Let's just call it tree. Call it get tree. Variant map. Now let's look at something like weather information. I don't know. I'm cold in Munich, so. Or location, that's easy. Let's say name is Munich. And then we would create another sub tree of that will have the coordinates. I don't remember the coordinates here, devs, excuse me. Some fake coordinates. And we'll put that coordinates into the root of the tree. Not coordination, that's what I'm lacking. I can't speak and do this at the same time. And we will return the root of the tree. Sorry? So it's a QVariant. It can be anything that maps well to QVariant. So it could be a QVariant map if you have a sort of a map. It can be a QVariant list. It could also be several other objects like date, regular expressions, Uh, and other things, I will also show a PixMap example. There is actually a very extensive documentation of which data types you can use here. Fortunately, I had a long flight from Tokyo to Helsinki, so I had time to do that. It's very tedious to do all the different data types it supports. It's a lot of code as well. So let's call it tree. In this case, I'll just put it as JSON because it will. Okay. We did call it tree, right? Yes. I don't compile. This should be a covariant map. Is that what you were trying to say before? Okay. Yeah. Thank God for compilers. Okay. Okay, so you see I have everything in JSON here. I can access it in JavaScript, etc., etc. Another interesting thing you can do with this if we talk about more advanced data types, is use PixMaps. This was actually my first contribution to WebKit about 2 years ago. So let's say I have a PixMap property. Should probably include that. I forget C++ every couple of days. Let's just fill it with black and create a painter. Put probably want to give this PixMap a size. So I can create a PixMap on the fly. I can also use it for. I can also pass image PixMaps the other way and do analysis on them or whatever. But this can be nicely used for off-thread rendering and complicated stuff you want to do with imaging. This is not very complicated, but you get the picture. So let's just erase all this text stuff. No, not reduce volume. This. So here I create an image. Call it my image. Actually, in HTML, you're not supposed to do this. And now we're going to get the pixmap from my object. And we're going to put it into the image element that we have. Why did I forget this time? Oh, fill rect. This should work, right? Ah. Okay, so we have an image coming from the native side and put into the web content. And then we can use CSS to do whatever we want with it. So yes.
Into a variable first? Okay, I'll repeat it. Why is it necessary to put this element from Qt into a JavaScript variable first?
You mean why do we need the assign to image element in there, or
you've done it before to put the text element into a var text?
Readability for this presentation.
Okay.
We can use whatever JavaScript coding style you want.
But now you call this function on the JavaScript variable coming from...
So there is a reason for this. We want to assign it to an intermediate variable because we don't know what we're going to do with that image. There are several things we can do with it. One is just to actually put it into the screen. One is to convert it to data URL and to use it like that. So you can put it into the source of the image. We also didn't want to create our own image element because it seemed like a little too magical to create an image element without you asking for it. It's an API choice. So.
What JavaScript type is this pixmap now?
It's a native object. It's a binding to a native object that has a few functions, like assign to image element and to data URL. So it's just an object. So now that we have an image here, we can actually take a native image and style it with CSS. So we can do stuff like border radius on it. And see the native image gets the border radius. Is it visible? It's a little small. That's fine. So we have 5 minutes before questions. So this is a different way of doing hybrid, which is with a accessing QNetwork Access Manager, overriding QNetwork Access Manager. In this case, the HTML, if you can see, all I have in the HTML is an image with a source, but the source takes some properties and parameters. Like it's my own thing called QtRender with some parameters. And I have my own QNetwork Access Manager and my own QNetwork reply. And I do all the rendering I want here. In this case, I even use Qt concurrent to make this work in a separate thread. And the idea is that I can declaratively say in HTML what I want done from my native renderer, and with the network handler, change everything about it, do whatever I want with it. Now, doing this is not that straightforward. The best way to handle this is with a copy-paste. This example specifically is on labs. I copy-pasted some of the mechanisms from a KDE example. So it's not that straightforward, but once you get the hang of it, there's a lot of things that this is very useful for.
Hello.
Hi.
Is the thread where the JavaScript code is running the same as the other application, or is there some kind of thread hopping being done?
That's a very good question. So the answer to that is that if you use QObjects, let's say properly, meaning you move the object to another thread, for example, my object in this case, then signals and slots will automatically work in that object thread. So the bridge, the Web to Qt bridge is inherently thread safe, though you can't use properties like that because they're not thread safe. But signals and slots are inherently thread safe as long as you move that object to a different thread in Qt.
Well, hello. Well, but I guess accessing the properties would be a problem then, wouldn't it?
I think setting properties would, I don't remember if it would work, but getting properties, yeah, it would not be a problem, it would just not be thread safe.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, hello. Can you comment on the WebKit 2 bridge? Is there already some information about it?
Yes, the information out there is in the mailing list and suggested approaches and one initial patch. So it's very, very initial. We're working hard to do the right thing for WebKit 2. For example, because it's process model, we don't want to abstract away the asynchronous nature of it. We don't want to allow people to do things that are too synchronous. So the first thing that already can be done, and there is a project I've posted in labs, is that you can do a highly integrated local web server. So that's already there, but that's more there until real APIs are there. I can't hear you, Alexei.
I do a talk about WebKit 2 tomorrow, so the question is better there.
Yeah. So I invite you to Alexei's talk, and I will leave a lot for there. But we are thinking about how to do this right in WebKit 2. Thank you, Alexei.
How about performance? Is this the Q object? Is a deep copy performed of the image data, or is it?
No.
Do you keep it using?
So in this case, the pixmap is never copied.
Okay, so I'm just asking how the performance the application runs on the device on the machine.
That's right. So what enables us to do this pixmap thing is that internally in WebKit, images are saved as QPixmaps. So in this case, all we do is add a reference to that pixmap into our native pixmap. So there's no deep copying.
Hi. In Linux, native pixmaps is a resource of the X server, right? So it is possible for some malicious user to implement some attack vectors using such an approach. Is there a way to sanitize your input? Is helpers or stuff like that implemented?
So first of all, yes, if you're using the if you're using the X11 graphic system, that is true. Though, in the case of Pixmaps, it's the native environment's choice which Pixmap to bring up. And the web environment cannot get your XID or do anything with it except put it in an image. Other than that, it raises a good question of security. What we usually tell people when they do hybrid, use it for trusted source environments, where you know where the content is coming from and you know that the pipe to that content is secure. Otherwise, review your security considerations carefully, like review those, those kind of things. Specifically, if you use the raster engine, this Pixmap is just a Q image. Also, in here, you can use Q images instead of Q Pixmaps, and it will do exactly the same thing. But there is no specific way to sanitize the variables.
Okay, thanks.
I would like to know, is it possible with WebKit to find out which elements are visible on screen at the moment?
So yes, it is possible. You mean elements from inside the HTML page?
Yes.
Yes, it's even possible to do that inside JavaScript by knowing your scroll width and height and going through the elements. But we can do that. Pierre showed before the QWeb element example. So we can pass. It's not even a hybrid issue. It's a matter of checking what the screen coordinates are and iterating through the elements and seeing where they are. But there is no standard function for that. It's more an iteration.
OK. Thank you.
It's probably also not 100% accurate. Like if you have a reflection, it might not count the reflection part of it, etc. So you want to use those things carefully, but it is possible to do. OK, I think we're all done. Thank you very much.